been to college. I've been a public school teacher. Not necessarily knocking any of it. But if you think colleges know best and have all the best outlets for what you can and can't do and what will and won't work in your life, professionally or in any other way, don't count on it. There's all kinds of things going on out there that your college counselor, your university isn't even aware of and is never going to be aware of. So give Ken and me another listen on the final part 3 of Conversations with Real People, as Ken and I discuss some of the things that you will never hear in school.
Job. A lot of times when we would go onto a project, we were relying on the guy that was there before us to get his project,
Oh yeah, you're
their
all
project
depending on
done.
each other, absolutely.
Okay, and we'd get there, and like half the time, sorry, Chip,
No, you broke it. No, okay.
wouldn't be the first time. But yeah, to get out there, and we would have to, we meaning my guys, because I didn't know enough about the intricacies of the project,
Mhm.
at the street level, and they would have to make up for all the mistakes made by the guys that were there before. It happened time
Oh
and
yes, oh
time
yes, oh
and
yes.
time again.
Yeah.
And Chad's going through that right now on a project where he has to, you know, people aren't there that are doing their job, and
Mhm.
on a $4 or $5 million home
Yeah,
in northern
yeah,
Kentucky,
yeah,
and
yeah.
through the Cutton Hill, where
Yeah.
these big monstrosities that they're
Yeah.
building 5 stories high, and lots when their
Building
houses
them
are.
bigger doesn't make them better necessarily.
I can tell you that for a
Yeah.
fact. I know the house that I sit in right now that was built in the 1870s and rebuilt over a 30-year period from the 80s to now.
Got to tell you a little secret. This house was never all that well built. I know all kinds of houses from the 19th century. This is one of the worst I've ever been in. So of course I had to go and buy it.
Well, Chip, well, I remember what you said when you bought it. You paid X number of dollars, and you got, what did you get? You got the lot, and the house came with it.
Yeah, I bought the lot and they gave me the house, and that's about right. Yeah, but
Well, you do have one of the most pristine lots in the city of Cincinnati, where your view out, out your front door,
yeah,
when you have that panoramic view of the entire city, it's quite
not
impressive.
too bad.
And you can see that in Chip's book, which is available on Amazon. Amazon, isn't that a rainforest somewhere in what is that?
That's what's supposed
See,
to
I'm
be.
not an internet guy or a computer guy. I'm not a technology guy. I just wish I was, but
But I did want to say, when we're talking about all this, and I've said a number of times, manipulating people is easy. Manipulating reality is tough. If reality doesn't give a shit about what your
doesn't.
problems are or how you feel
It
about it.
doesn't.
Reality doesn't care how hard you tried or how good your intentions were. Doesn't matter.
See, and that reality is our in our
That's the
world
world we live in.
was our Nestle job, when we've got everything we've got, and the value of the company was in that particular project because it was so large. We took it on, but again, the only reason we succeeded, and there was a litany of problems, major problems, is because we never gave up.
Yes. Yeah.
And tenacity and you know um, sheer will, and not just that. Believe me, it didn't come. I was just in the mix. I the guys on the job get the credit,
Yeah.
and where we were all in there in the fire together,
Yeah.
that's kind of, and I can't tell you how many fires, because in our world, when you're finishing concrete, you're out there and you're on very unique projects, whether it's music hall or the Air Force Base or whatever, parks. You get out there and you get weather changes, and you had, 2 or 3 thousand square feet of concrete on the ground, and it's going to be a real specialty finish. You can't say, well, let's just go home,
Yeah,
pick
I
up
do
our
that too. I mean,
loads.
just obviously not on your scale, but pouring just a little bit of a pad kind of thing. Got to be quitting time. Quit. Just when it's
No,
not done.
no,
It's quitting time.
no,
Oh, yeah.
we didn't, where, well, I've been working all day without a break. We didn't have lunch. Okay.
Yeah.
That wouldn't fly in some realities. In our reality, that was just the way it was.
Yeah.
I remember my son said to me, he was working with us when he was younger, and quickly realized he didn't want to be in this business. And he said, "What time are we going to get home?" I said, "We'll get home when we get home. I have no idea. Can't tell you what's going to happen during the day. We'll get home when we're finished." Didn't like that. You know, he had someplace to be. I'm like, sorry.
Yeah.
I wish I could be a little nicer about it. You know, maybe my tone wasn't the greatest, but like, so it is what it is.
Concrete's curing here, buddy. You know.
Or, you know, once you get it down, you know, you know, I mean, a 6 hour day could turn into 16 just like that.
Yeah.
And and what's the option? If everybody leaves, oh, we'll just do it again.
Yeah.
You want to,
And one thing I've
who
said
wants
a number of times, it's fine. I'll tell a guy, it's just great that you're willing to do it over again 2 or 3 times to get it right. But the customer's only paying me once.
well, we always did a job to make money doing it one time.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you do something twice,
Cost you big
are,
time.
and are you going to pass it on to your customer?
The customer's not going to
I
let you.
don't think so.
No.
I don't think so.
Yeah,
Not in my world.
excuse me, Mr. Customer. We're going to have to raise
No,
the bid amount by 20%.
It didn't
They'll
didn't
just
happen.
laugh at you. Yeah.
So, and that's just we knew that as the reality. That was never a
Yeah.
problem. That was never a problem. But getting, you had mentioned earlier something that you had done that always I found to be completely remarkable. Number one, your skill set as a woodworker, knowing what you've done and what you've accomplished. One of the things you did, and it's in the book again, Chip rebuilt countless wooden vehicles.
Mhm.
What? Who made wooden vehicles? Ford.
Everybody pretty much. But Ford
The
kind
big
of.
three. Ford.
Well, everybody, but Ford owned the kind of controlled the
Chrysler.
market in the 40s. They made where others made 1,000, they made 10,000. Ford
I
never
didn't
went.
realize they were that big. Because that's
Ford, the biggest production that I'm pretty sure I'm right about is in like 1947 or 8. Ford made like 23,000 Woody wagons, which compared to their overall production is peanuts. You know,
Mhm.
even then they were making hundreds of thousands of cars. But the wooden bodied cars, which in case anybody doesn't get it, in the 50s they started sticking wood on the side of a steel car. But back in the 40s and the 30s, that was a wood body, not just a steel car with wood attached to it. Anyway, and there's a whole story that I've got to try to figure out about why they even bothered doing that. But I think it was more of a nostalgic thing, a status thing to have a wood bodied car. So, as a matter of fact, the Woodies were Ford's most expensive car at the time. So,
Really?
yeah,
I didn't know that.
so it wasn't a budget item by any means. But so where was I? We were talking about what were we trying to get at?
Well, I was just saying, you know, this is not an everyday skill set.
No.
If you look at the picture on the left hand on right here, this is Chip's shop, which was I'm on the other side of that wall, my shop, but Chip rebuilt these things by hand, not doing mechanical work, but doing all the woodwork.
Let's say by hand.
By hand. And who does that, Chip?
There are other people.
There are, but
I have competition somewhat.
There aren't many.
Not many.
There aren't many, and I just have to say,
what attracted me to that was because, of course, they're just beautiful cars. So aesthetically, you're into building something that's really neat to look at. But it's also the engineering, you know. In the original cars, people think back in the 40s, oh, they must have had men at a workbench with a hammer and chisel, you know, carving it. Bullshit. They were going like hell. They had big, huge machines that were slamming that stuff out. And fairly frequently, I would ask myself, how much slower am I going?
Were these built on an assembly line, Chip?
Oh, hell yes. No, they could be handmade. You could order specially this or that.
But the 23,000
we
that
were
they
just
made,
looking at there, like I say, 23,000 in a year. They weren't hand making those suckers. No, they were slamming them out in a factory, and they were hauling ass. And so I would ask myself, how much longer am I taking than they took? And I probably at least 10 times longer than they were. So yeah, they weren't a bunch of little.
well, you did it all by hand, though. So you didn't.
Well, with machinery, I mean.
But still, you had bandsaws and.
Yeah, right.
You know, you didn't have a machine set up that would a CNC machine that would.
No, and we discussed that. There are other people maybe it's different now because the last time I did this was 15 years ago, maybe. But we were discussing various of my peers, can we convert any of this over to CNC? And it was theoretically possible, but you're not making thousands of them. You're making two and three.
Yeah,
By
you
the time you program it and go through it all, you could have made the damn thing, you know?
the most I ever
Uh,
saw in your shop, like, because I would come and visit all the time. You just like in the morning, just look and see what you were doing. So it was fascinating to me to see this. In addition to the other commercial cabinetry work that you were doing and woodworking, this was not your only business rebuilding cars.
mhm.
And but you only had you. I think the most I would ever count in the shop at any given time was maybe 4 or 5 cars.
Yeah, give or take.
All right, so
But you know,
they weren't all the same models, so you had
no,
to make you couldn't if you set up a CNC to do multiple parts, you had
right,
to have the
yeah,
same model,
right,
which you never did. They were
right.
always
Well, the Fords we made, and that was a good call I made on my part. Early on when I was doing cars, um, somebody asked, "Can you do a Ford Woody?" And I certainly knew what that car was. But I said, "I've never done a Woody. There's no reason why I couldn't." So he was taking a leap of faith on me that I could
well.
do it.
Explain. I don't understand. Are there other wooden cars other than Woodies?
The original real production cars of any sort had a steel skin that was literally nailed to a wood frame. So
Hmm,
Model T has a wood frame,
I didn't know
as
that.
did any car of that time. And lots of little nails all around the edges and going that steel to it. Uh, and that's what I think is that just about the time steel was being phased out of car bodies and they were becoming all steel, at about that time they started making woodies. And I'm going, what they're going backwards? Why are they making all wood cars with no steel? And I think it was a nostalgia factor. I think maybe some businessmen said, "Hey, we've got a wood factory here that makes cars, and the wood is being phased out of these steel body cars. Let's make woodies." I don't know what or why or how, but woodies became fairly popular.
So what is the Woody? Is that a combination of steel and wood?
No, a woody, it depends who's defining the term, but a woody typically is a wood bodied car, but it has front clip, the cowl and everything forward is the same exact steel of any other sedan or anything else. But everything body wise behind the cowl is wood. It's
What is
got
the cow?
the cowl is part in front of the windshield.
Like the firewall?
Yeah, the windshield frame is steel
Okay.
and everything in front of that, but everything back of that is wood. Um, and to this day, I don't know whose bright idea that was because it didn't make sense, practically speaking. Just at the time they were getting to the point that they didn't need to use wood, they started using it. I mean, it's just something was going on that people decided that's a good idea,
Right.
and they weren't stupid; they just wanted to do it. Um, and so there you go. Also, just since we're on this, the very first, I mean, you talk about manufactured cars. Okay, in any real sense, that's the Model T. That's the first seriously manufactured car. Before that, they were produced onesie twosies, literally almost hand assembled, even what we would call production cars with their wood framed body. Uh, and so having a custom body wasn't like a big deal because they were almost custom anyway. So a customer could say, "Well, I want you to change it like this." And I say, "Okay." Um, Rolls Royce never made their own body until 1930 something, I think. So for 20 or so years, they made the chassis. The customer would have the chassis set to this or that bodybuilder, and they put a body on it, custom made for the customer. In my basement, I have pictures because my father's place where he did the electrical manufacturing.
In New England.
In New England, in the Boston area, the manufactured commercial switchboards, industrial type stuff, not house wiring. But anyway, he moved in there. Well, the place had been there before him was a custom body manufacturer, and they had all these nice pictures on display of custom bodies they made,
Hmm.
which I have hanging down in
For
the
a
basement.
variety of manufacturers.
Yeah, it didn't matter what manufacturer, and so they would make a custom body. So the reason I got all into this is because when you wanted the most economical possible custom body, you made
Hmm.
it out of wood because really anybody with reasonable skill could do it. So I would take a model T chassis with the windshield forward is all steel, behind that it's all wood. They could make it into a pickup truck, any kind of configuration Uh, and so it made sense because you could do that with wood. You couldn't do it with steel so well, not so easily. So that whole idea of using wood for very low production cars actually had a practical application. Once they started hitting thousands of cars a year, the wood made less and less sense. And still, in the 1930s and 40s, somebody got the bright idea. Yeah, but they're neat looking, so they started making them out of wood.
Oh, they're beautiful.
Yeah,
And a lot of these, they still exist. They're just, you just don't see them.
yeah,
See, I'm looking at a Rolls Royce. Were you involved in that one?
yeah. I made that 40. That
A
was
Rolls Royce, a
yeah,
19,
30 was 32, isn't it? 31 or two. Yeah, because that had been what was that? I never even saw the original body, but the customer yanked it off of there. But it had been a sedan or some such. He found me and said, I want a wooden motel speedster. I said, okay. So that's what he got.
wow. And there it is. And there's Chip working on it right
Yeah.
there. See that Chip, that to me, I can't speak more highly. You know,
Well, and
and
I
I'm not
was,
even, the words are hard
yeah,
to
well,
form, but
and I said,
you guys that can do
yeah,
this
yeah.
is just, I just
But
find
I
that
had to learn to do.
I understand
Yeah,
that, but
yeah.
you still have the innate ability to do it. I don't know how, I don't have that confidence to do something like that. And
But
guys like you and Joe and Bert, come on now. It's like,
but
and look at that.
and that's a word I want to get in here about that. It's because so many people go to school, and I think college is sinful in this regard.
Today it is.
I'm not knocking college. I went to college, and there's things
So
I
did
can say
I.
nice about, things not so nice, but that you're really being channeled into whatever channel you here, channel you there. And I think to myself, if I ever gone to a high school guidance counselor or my college counselor or whatever and said, I've always wanted to build car bodies out of wood. Do you think I can make a living doing that? They'd all look at me like, what the hell are you talking about? And the people who go through the system and go through these channels because that's where everybody's programmed to go, they almost don't even have the people who are doing the channeling don't even know what's out there and what you can do.
That's probably the key right there.
Yeah.
Because if you went to your guidance counselor and said, "Hey, I want to rebuild or I want to build wooden vehicles,"
Yeah.
what I'm not sure what they do know. I'm not going to
It
minimize them,
depends on the counselor,
but
obviously.
they should be able to handle all kinds of
At
kids.
least to the extent of saying, well, let me look into this and see what's
Right,
available and
right.
maybe I can point you in the right
Well,
direction.
there is we are seeing a rebirth of the trades to
Hmm.
some degree, where technical schools and trade schools, you know, plus these kids can make a lot of money in these trades, as opposed to coming out of college with an art history degree,
You,
which is nothing wrong with
yeah,
art history, but
yeah, but good luck making a living at it. But yeah, because there are welders graduating from welding school or whatever you even call it, who are starting in the neighborhood of $100,000 a
well,
year.
I can tell you this, you know became friends with you, and partly because I was completely interested in what you were doing
Mhm.
and total respect for it. And I met a gentleman at the Home and Garden Show 20 years ago who was a immigrant. He's a Dutchman, um, and he's a metal fabricator. And and I have had the opportunity in the last couple of years, since I have a little more free time, to help him. He needs an extra set of hands, somebody that's willing to work. I We don't pay each other. He helps me. I help him.
Like we've been known to do.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
We're it's not about money at this point, but I watch him fabricate these railing systems and these stair systems that go into, 5, 10, $15 million homes. And it's all steel, glass, wood. Last week we were powder coating, a set of stairs with, there must have been 3 sections. It was probably for a 4-story house. And he had fabricated the steps, and I was helping him powder coat that day. He has a friend of his that he uses his shop.
Hmm.
And so the tradesmen have a tendency to work with each other.
Oh, yeah.
But in my role, I'm getting to watch and see this done,
Hmm.
and just admire it.
Yeah.
And wishing I had those skills. But having a young kid, Bert is a one-man show. He fabricates this all himself, and sometimes I help him install.
Hmm.
All right, and he builds these amazing
Yeah.
railing and stair systems. And but if he had a protege or a what's the word? An apprentice,
Hmm.
right? So a simple apprentice. when Bert's finished, Bert's 58 years old. When he's finished in a year or two, imagine fabricating steel, the amount of work that that takes, and the weight that he's dealing with. I know because I help him move these things. But if he had a young fabricator that was wanting to learn in a
Yeah, you
couple
walk
of,
right into it.
he'd
Yeah,
have a business and
yeah,
a business with a reputation. You talked about that.
yeah.
Bert's website is pretty much obsolete. I never had a website because we worked on word of mouth. I was
Yeah.
fortunate enough when I started, had that license, and it kind of got me into the mix.
Yeah, yeah.
And we became known just because of the previous work that had been done with that license.
People talk about networking, and when you usually see it or hear networking, you're talking about people in a seminar between lawyers and marketing people, and this. My networking is a job site. There's plumbers, there's electric, concrete,
I
fabric,
have found
steel erector. Anytime you had a question on this house about, well, what should I do about the plumbing here? Next time I was on a job site, I'd find a plumber or an electrician.
right, and they're always willing to talk to you
Stop and talk
because
about,
most of them are, hey, this is my trade, and you're showing interest in their
Yeah,
trade.
yeah.
What a better way to learn it.
Yeah.
And that's where I have found. It's where I met you through work. I met Bert through work.
Yeah.
Joe through work, and these are three guys right there that are extremely successful in their own right just because of their skill sets.
Yeah.
And and we're all about the same age, and I'm thinking, wow, this is kind of cool, but I don't know who's. I'm sure somebody's gonna. There are kids out there that are taking these things over. I know they are.
Well,
we need more.
We need a lot more, and that's why I just popped in my head because we're talking about networking and finding out how to do something. It's funny because I did have competition.
Well, everybody has competition.
Sure. Specifically the Ford Woodies, because I was the only person that manufactured the parts. People could and did order individual parts for their car. They just had one rotted piece or something happened, two or three pieces. You didn't have to send a car for me to work it out. If it was a Ford, I could send you the parts. Did that for decades. I was known for it. And I had my production down as far as how I do it. And it was reasonably efficient considering I would make at most maybe 10 parts at a time. And okay, I no longer have my shop, and another customer, one of my established customers, comes to me and says, "Make me one more car." In my garage. I should have said no.
I remember when you did that, Chip.
Yeah. So anyway, I couldn't do finger joints, had no way of doing it. I couldn't cut the profiles, had no way of doing it. The rest of it I could do in my home shop and in the garage. So I know a guy
in the garage of your enormous garage of your 1872 built home, which is very small.
Oh no, the garage. I have a three cars worth of garage.
But still, not when you're talking about making parts for.
But the biggest problem wasn't how much room I had. What machines I didn't have anymore. But anyway, so I know this guy in Traverse City, Mike Nichols, who was theoretically a competitor. He didn't manufacture to any real extent, but he would make Woody's parts for Woody's. And I called him and I said, "This guy wants me to make him another Woody. I'm going to need finger joining and I'm going to need these profiles." He knew the profiles, of course. And I said, "Can we work that?" And he said, "Sure, come on up." So I poured a little Equinox full of the wood, not the whole car's worth of wood, but everything he needed to do. Haul it up to Traverse City, and we cut the finger joints and we cut the profiles so I could work on the car. The funny thing is, he didn't do anything on the same kind of machine I did or in the same way. And I just think that's kind of funny because you will find a way that suits you. But it's not necessarily only one way to do it.
But the end result was the same.
Exactly the same end result.
Okay, I mean, there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? And as a craftsman, I mean, I never considered myself a craftsman. I was involved in the crafts, and I was lucky enough to be around them and learn from them and enjoy it. And that's my extent. But in your case, I mean, in our case, we had competitors, and everybody did things differently, which is fine, And
the other thought comes to my mind. My brother-in-law Gene, who was an incredible engineer, unfortunately died of cancer not too long ago.
Sorry.
His specialty was designing machinery for industry. Not stuff you'd go to hardware store and buy or even order. They would build your specific machine.
Was he a Cincinnati guy?
No, actually, New York, not far from me, closer to Albany. They were always close to Albany. one of his first jobs, and any job he had was like, many years long. He would stay with the job until the factory closed down or something. But he made machinery for a paper mill.
Hmm.
And he also made later on machinery for weaving, whatever you call it, fabric mills.
Hmm.
He also made uh, big presses for pressing whatever. So I think those are three main career moves anyway. So he's in this place making paper machine, paper manufacturing machinery. You see those rolls of paper on a video shooting through there, and they go through this machine, that machine, roller here, roller there, stuff's happening. He made those, designed them. Well, he didn't know how to make paper. A little problem there, so he goes to the paper mill to see how they make paper, so he can fabricate machines to make paper. Um, and he'd watch a crew set up to make a certain grade of paper, and they'd turn this dial and that dial and then move this here, and they get that position like that. And in the end, they get the grade of paper they're supposed to have. The next shift would come on. They'd change everything. On different dials, should adjust a different way. The same paper came out. Everybody had their way of doing it to come up with to meet specs. So
Well, it's just
it, it
like
yeah.
more than
So
one way to skin
it's
a
a
cat.
matter of
Yeah.
having your own mind and how you're going to do it. And I don't mean being contrary, but just developing your plan that
Right,
works.
right, right, right,
Yeah.
and that's fine. And in your case, when you're and your buddy up in say Traverse City,
Mhm.
you know, you made the same thing, but you were able to tap into somebody that you knew to get what you needed to finish the car without having all of your tools.
Yeah.
You're just, I think, isn't that called thinking outside the box?
Yeah.
You've heard that term
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
It's like, I think everything about small business
I
and small businessmen and women
I
is
don't
outside the
I
box.
don't think I don't it's not just thinking outside the box, it's living outside the box.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's that in that sense,
I mean,
yeah.
I buy sliced bread at the store. Okay, that's inside the box, I guess.
Yeah,
But
and
but
but I don't know.
everything I encounter, I say, why is it being done like this? And because that's how we always do it, is not necessarily
Right,
equal to nothing. It's
right.
you know,
Maybe the air is a little stale in that situation,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I understand, thinking and you're to your point, living outside the box. I I I don't know how I did it, and maybe it was out of necessity, and for you maybe the same. But I had a family to support, and I was finished in the corporate world for me. I had opportunity to go work for other large companies,
Mhm.
global companies in the industry that I was trained in. I was done. It's like, you
I
know,
hear that a lot.
you
I got
know,
to say one thing for being in a small business where you live by your wits. It never gets boring. It's never the same day every day,
oh, ever, ever, ever,
and
ever, ever,
and
ever, ever,
success
ever.
or failure, you carry it on your shoulders, both of them. In the corporate world, of course, you're just a cog. Maybe an important relevant cog, and maybe all those cogs are nice people and it really amounts to something, but your sense of individuality gets kind of
Yeah, and I had maybe I was spoon fed some of the some of the bullshit um, early on. Like you guys are the most important part of this company, and yada yada
yeah,
yada.
yeah,
All the accolades that were
yeah,
thrown at
yeah.
you. Fine, I saw through a lot of that. But I remember never having. I never looked for a job while I was employed in the 20 years until I think I was approached twice by two companies, and over the years.
Mhm.
Both of them were global companies, and one came to me, wanted to interview me for a job. I'm like, okay, what the heck, I'll talk. This is 17 or 18 years into my uh, career with Kodak at the time, and um, they said, bring a resume. I said, a
Yeah.
resume? I'm like, I don't have a resume.
Mhm.
Well, you need a resume if you want an interview. I said, um, you called me. I
Yeah.
didn't call you. Not trying to be, flippant here, but I'm not going to sit down and write a resume, because you called me, and but I had told my boss about it. I was kind of an open book, um, and
We
but
don't usually do that.
I was pretty. I wasn't open about the fact that I had started a business,
Yeah.
but I was open to the fact that I was being approached by another company. And he said, "This is what really probably helped me more than anything." And he always called me by my last name. He said, "Schroeder." And I think his exact words were, um, "Kodak will miss you for a week." And then he paused and then he said, "Maybe." In other words,
Yeah.
you've been trained to be, you've been trained to think
Sure.
that you're the reason this company is here today.
Yeah.
I'm here to, he's telling me,
Yeah.
don't overestimate your value. And I'm like, that was kind of refreshing,
Yeah. No.
because at that point, I mean, I was totally dedicated
Mhm.
to my job. I never looked for a job otherwise.
Mhm.
And, I'm like, And a few years later, when things really started to change, that's when they, I used to call it was Christmas time. It was time for the VP to get out his axe and start chopping heads because they always seem to have layoffs at Christmas time.
Mhm.
I was like, oh, okay. This is toward the end
Mhm.
of my career, the last 5 or 6 years, and I think I made 5 waves. And then I realized it's like I better be thinking about doing something else,
Yeah.
you know, because they're not going to be here to take care of me.
Yeah.
Don't overestimate your value. That you're so valuable that they'll put you in front of the
Mhm.
owner, and it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You're just cog on the wheel, and I don't care who you are in the company, big, small, you know, front office or back office. You're just in a big company. You're just a number, which is
Well,
it's okay.
if you want 10,000 employees, do that, man. It's just,
And I didn't. I was at that point. I was like, okay, let me try something different.
yeah.
It's a little risky when you have 4 kids, and
I
you
mean,
know,
CEOs get fired.
well, duh.
You're out of here.
I mean,
Yeah.
who isn't replaceable?
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't think you're not.
In a big business now, in my business, of course, almost hour by hour, I needed to be there because there wasn't a backup.
Again, and for Joe and I, the reason we were successful is because we took every single job, mostly, you know, like it was the lifeblood of the company.
Yeah.
And if you didn't succeed, because we were also different, we didn't take any cash from customers, whether it was commercial or residential, until we were finished.
Really?
Never
Not big
did.
draws. Yeah. Because I don't know
Never
about
did.
you, but our jobs, commercial jobs, buildings and stuff, architectural work, they could last several months or longer.
Well, on a commercial project, as they got larger, as our company grew over the years, um, we would, you know, because payment is so people don't have to understand that when you work for a large contractor or a large corporation as a contractor, as a sub like we were, um, everything's on a schedule. So you could bill every 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So if we were on a large project like, some of these that we've done over the years, we didn't do large ones early on, but some of the larger ones, as we started getting through them, it would take 3 or 4 months to complete.
Yeah.
And then we would do progress payments.
Right.
But on residential work, we finance them 100% of the time, all the time.
I tended to take at least a 50%
No, we
deposit,
never.
not for the money. Well, for sure for the money, but I want the commitment from the customer.
Well, once we were in, we were in, and I
No,
understand
I
that.
get that. You're doing business with somebody so much.
But our residential work rarely took more than 2 weeks. Rarely.
Mhm.
So we would say our contract was very simple. It was a 2-page document. We didn't have a lot of T's and C's.
Mhm.
And I was trying to express to them, look, we're in this and we mean it, and we'll get the job done. And you'll be happy. Then we expect to be paid.
Yeah.
Okay, so net invoice. There's no 30 days once we finish the job. When we're finished, we want a check.
Okay.
And in most cases, it worked that way. Now, there were times we had to take things a little bit more aggressively, where you know, for whatever reason, and it wasn't usually for performance, that people would not want to pay at the end. So I got very good at understanding simple aspects of certain laws, like lien laws. They're very specific.
Mhm.
If you file liens, and they can be thrown out like that, even though you file one. So you have to go through the right hoops for a lien to be filed, and I was very good at it. And I would, if I had,
Practice makes perfect, I
if I,
guess.
well, the first couple of times I would hire a lawyer and then spending $500 or $1,000 to file a lien. I could do this myself.
Mhm.
I needed certain verbiage, I needed legal descriptions, and I needed the courthouse. It cost me $48. And but then you have some hooks. You have
Yeah,
a lien.
yeah.
And now, if you don't follow the rules, it's
It's
like, oh,
unfortunate the rules get so ridiculous.
well,
But the rules are for the
the
lawyers,
rules,
not for us.
well, no, but rules are rules, and those are the rules of engagement. And I learned my lesson on an IHOP. Everybody's heard of IHOP. We did an IHOP we worked as a sub to a sub. So to the general contractor, we were basically invisible.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the sub that we were working for turned out to be a deadbeat. All right. So I thought I was a tough guy, and I saber rattled with the general contractor and the CFO of this company out of Cleveland. He says to me, I said, I'm going to file a lien. He says, Ken, you don't have lien rights. I said, what do you mean I don't have lien rights? You didn't file a notice of furnishings. You didn't file a um, notice of commencement. All right. You didn't send any of that to us. You have no lien rights. So the air was completely out of my sails.
Mhm,
It
mhm,
was like 10 grand.
mhm.
10 grand is 10 grand.
Yeah,
We had
yeah,
finished the job,
yeah.
and my partner says, we'll never get that money. I'm like, just have a little faith. So I got a little bit more aggressive with the guy, and the general contractor recognized that the subcontractor wasn't up and up. So he says, look, I can't send you all the money, but I'll send you half, which was, he didn't have to send me anything. The general contractor.
Yeah.
It
Oh,
has the,
general contract, yeah. And he probably took it out of the other guy's pocket too.
he
Yeah,
did, but he couldn't take it all. Maybe that's all he had to pay. But
yeah.
bottom line was he sent me like $4,000 or $5,000, which I was very appreciative of. And it took me about a year to get the rest of it from the sub. And um, I said to the CFO, I said, once I get paid in full, I'll return the money. And it's the first thing I did. I sent the money back to him. He couldn't believe I sent the money back to the general
Yeah,
contractor. So
yeah.
it took me a year of chasing this guy to finally get paid.
Mhm.
But we did. I mean, I can be a persistent guy. Um, and those are the things that people don't know
Mhm.
when you get into business that you're going to encounter, because you think everybody's going to always pay you every time, but it's not always the case
Not all.
for a variety
Yeah.
of reasons.
And business,
Usually not for
and
performance.
businesses go bankrupt. That kind of alluded to what I
I
said. That one mistake by one guy, and poof, an established, decades-old business can disappear like you wouldn't believe how quick.
We had a rule, we're never going to take a job that could put us out of business, but we broke that rule often because some of these jobs got very large.
Mhm.
And if they didn't go well, I don't know if we would have survived it.
Yeah.
If the Nestle job, for example, didn't go well, I don't know if we could have survived it because it was in the hundreds of thousands,
Mhm.
where, it had some stability. I don't know if it would have been worth saving. I don't know. I
Yeah.
would have had to make, we never crossed that bridge because we succeeded in getting the job done.
Yeah.
But I can tell you there were times when we never thought it would happen. Never thought it would.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what can you
That
say?
said, in any particular job or project or whatever, there's only so much money you can make, but it's almost a limitless amount of money you can lose. So
Is
you have to be very cautious.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yes. And but we're sitting here and we can look back and we're doing good. I'm not unhappy.
We made it. We made it to the other end, I guess.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Assuming we're at the other end just yet. I don't
sir.
know, but so.
Well, it's still a jury. Still a jury, Jeff.
Yeah. Well, have we got anything else? Or have we solved all the world's problems between the two of us?
Always do. Always do.
Solved the world's problem many times. I don't know why.
Chip, I like hanging around you
Yeah.
and, love working with you still, and still come up with things to do.
Yeah.
There's always something to do.
Yeah, for a fact. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for.
My pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
I certainly did.
Really did.
Again, we've had a few conversations like this, so
And we'll have, and There'll be
Yeah,
more to
we'll
come.
have others.
More
Yeah.
to come.
Okay. Well, I will just sign off and thank Ken for being here at Individuals Unite, Conversations with Real People. And we will talk to you next time.
Chip.
We'll see you. So, way back at the beginning of these 3 episodes, I suggested that you might find some things out that you had not previously been aware of concerning business and contracting. And now you know, I hope, a lot more. As I often say, contracting is not for sissies. If you want a nice, easy life, work for government, work at something where they don't really care if you succeed or not. Contracting ain't like that. Contracting has customers, and customers have standards, and you will meet them or else. So, if you're a sissy, work for the government. If you got some, you might want to try going out there in the real world and see if you can make it all work. Thanks for listening.